All right, so coil pots. So coil building, I can either start with pinching the bottom of the piece and moving on from there, or I can start with a flat piece of clay. So I'm gonna make a flat piece and I'm gonna build up from there just to simplify things a little bit and to show you how to do this. So one thing that really helps if I throw it so that it's going a little bit sideways, I can actually make a pretty flat piece, pretty even piece of clay without even rolling it out a little bit. I want to have, you guys are going to be going to 10 inches high. I don't know what I did with all my rollers. Really quickly, if I can. If I can't, then I'll skip it. There's one. So 10 inches is to here to here. And that's a decent sized coil pot. It's not a huge one. Traditionally, we've gone to 12, sometimes 14. The larger you go, like the difference between 10 and 12 is a lot, because suddenly you've got to really think about how thick your piece is and supporting itself. You never want it to get too thick, but it does need to support itself. So you can use like a regular rolling pin for this, or even just a round stick. This happens to be handy for me right now. I'm doing a bunch of demo videos all in one evening because the week has gotten away from me quite a bit. I'm gonna just roll that out so that's a little more even. And go from there. So that looks pretty good. I thought I saw a bubble. I do right there. So I'm gonna poke it with something sharp. Just push the air out of it, and that's good. All right. So pinch pots. There are a couple of ways to do this. Don't let anybody tell you that one way is the right way and the other way is wrong. But there are determining factors. So basically, when you're coiling, you're adding kind of strings or ropes of clay that you roll out. So how thick the walls of my piece are determined by how thick I make this. I always roll this thicker than I need it because I'm going to be pinching and blending it, and it's going to get thinned out in that process. So this is probably twice as thick as I need it. So if you feel like you need to have a little thicker wall to support itself, then you might want to start out thicker than this. But I want it thicker than I need it because it's not going to stay this thickness. So to begin with, this is a rather organic shape. It's not completely round. If I want it completely round, then I need to find something round sitting around that I can trace. Or I could cut a circle on a piece of paper first and get that a little more refined. But I can find a jar or can or something and trace that around this to get that shape. I happen to have cookie cutters, so I could use that. I'm just going to use it the way that it is. You guys are going to be creating 2 10-inch coil pots. One is going to be asymmetrical and one is going to be symmetrical. I do want you to look at the assignment online. Because the historical pot project is based on Chinese Neolithic period and the Japanese Jomon period. And these are the earliest coil pots in existence for the most part. You know, they always find those ones that are like 30,000 BC. But these are prehistory So they're before written history, but there's a really diverse culture going on with these pots. And you can see a very distinctive style between one or the other. The Japanese tend to be much more asymmetrical, really, really ornately textured. They were referred to as rope jars because the outsides of them looked kind of like they were decorated with a rope motif in a way. And then the Chinese Neolithic. This is so typical of, like, honestly, both of these cultures' aesthetics to this day. The Chinese are much more symmetrical, the designs are much more methodical, they're much less organic. That is still true today. Chinese artwork, Chinese pottery in particular, tends to be more refined, more symmetrical. Like, it's really sometimes hard to tell that somebody actually touched it to make it. And the Japanese tend to really revere things that are handmade. So if something is too perfect, they will actually screw it up on purpose to make it look more handmade. All right, so you guys are all gonna have scoring tools. So I made these, they're just pins with Sculpey, and I'm scratching up this surface. So one way of attaching coils to your piece is to score it and slip it. I have this brush in my slip, and it's really gross. I kind of forgot about it. All right, so I'm gonna add some slip to that after I have scored it. If I haven't scored it, the slip doesn't really do me any good because it's not like magic glue. It's watered down clay, and I'm using it not on its own to stick my two sides together. I'm using it to actually soften up the surfaces of this and this so that they bind together. But if I don't soften that up, like if I don't scratch that up and soften that up, and I just put slip between it and stick them together, they're just gonna slide because you're not working that in there at all. I'm gonna push that down. And I probably should put something under this. This is where it's good that I have a very porous surface that I'm working on. So, when you guys are working on these, I want you to put something under it. Like, tear a page out of your sketchbook. I'm gonna go grab this paper. Any piece of paper will work. Something, see, it's already stick. If I get it wet under there, even though it's porous, it'll still want to stick. So I can do that. And that way I can just spin around and do that. And see, I didn't measure my coil very well, which is fine. So I'm gonna roll this out to about the same thickness. That looks good. It's not perfect. It's okay. My coil pets tend to look very ugly while I'm building them. And then I come in and work them together later. I find it extremely inefficient to be overly smoothing along the way. I know some of you will have an inclination to do that. I'm not gonna outright tell you not to, but I'm gonna suggest there are better ways to spend your time than perfecting every single freaking layer of this thing. All right, so the first one I slipped because I have a flat piece. I have nothing to really work together, right? I'm just putting this right on top out to the edge. I do want to put it on top of the piece below it. And I'm going to work that together a little bit, but I'm not going to work it together too much yet. That slip is very, very gooey still. And if I try to blend this right now, I'm going to slide a lot. But that should be nice and well stuck. I'm pulling up the paper too. So it's not coming off of there because I scored. Right. Now, see, that's pretty ugly right now, but that's okay. We're going to work that. The next layer This is where it gets controversial. If you've done coil pots before in high school, and they told you that you had to score and slip between every layer of your coil pot, I'm about to tell you that is not true. All right, so there are lots of cultures that coil this way, including Native Americans, some Native Americans. I'm not vouching for all, but instead of scoring and slipping, because this layer is nice and soft, and this is pretty soft. Oh, I'm good there. Okay. So I'm not gonna put it on top, because if I put it on top, I can't just blend that outside together and have it be fine, because that's not really stuck together then. I've got this whole area in between here where those two pieces of clay are just pressing against one another, but they're not being pushed together. So I'm gonna overlap this, and I'm gonna really work these pieces together. I'm gonna push the inside down. And the outside is gonna come up. And I'm kinda squishing it and turning it together as I go up. If you're not comfortable with this, if you need more precision as you go, then by all means score and slip between each layer. If you're doing a design where you want to stack one coil directly on top of another, then you are free to score and slip between layers. But I am going to tell you, you are going to have to blend the coils together and then create your texture. There's two reasons for that. One, creating your texture out of your coils is something that everybody does, and I want you to break out of that idea that that's the only way to make a coil pot. And two, your coil pot's going to be stronger if you work it all together and then carve it. So I'm just going to keep going for a few layers. This is actually twisting as I attach it. It's flipping over because I'm pushing the clay together so much. Right? So it's not pretty right now, but then I'm going to go in. Oops, sorry, I didn't do that right. With my metal rib of death. We call it that because it's very sharp. If you were to flip it in your hands and try to catch it, just let it flip. It's fine. So I'm going to go in and work this together. And now this is a nice solid piece of clay. And it looks a lot nicer too. Oops, see, I just jabbed it instead of doing that. So my slip is still, you can see it's still really, really shiny and wet down there. You might not be able to see that. I can see it. Work this together. So this is straight up and down, which isn't very exciting. But it does give you the technique. So it's a little slippery in the bottom. So if I have pushed so much that my bottom is getting too thin, I feel fine, but I feel some areas that could have been iffy, then it is okay to add another coil inside there and blend it in and patch it. If your piece is dried out a lot in the meantime, then you might want to score and slip before you attach another piece. I would say minimally, because you don't want to soften up that bottom. You just want to be able to attach more clay. So at this point, I can keep going up like this if I want to. But the reality is, my sides are still pretty thick. So I'm going to actually go in and pinch it up a bit anyway. And I'm going to start to actually flare it out when I do this. So as I pinch it up, when I get up near the top, instead of pulling it up, I'm gonna pinch it and just let it go out. So I can pinch it and move it up, or I can pinch it and move it out. I'm not worried about this uneven edge anymore because I'm still building on it. That doesn't matter yet. And then this isn't very far, but it's a little soft already. I could definitely add like maybe 2 more coils on this and it would be fine. One of the reasons I'm having to do 2 coil pots. So we're doing 2 10-inch coil pots instead of 1 big 12-inch coil pot. And I gotta say, the structure of the project is a little less exact. Before you had to do it exactly like the one you designed. So this allows for a little more freedom. But one of the reasons I'm having you work on 2 coil pots is that the temptation is to keep going with this. And if you're somebody that is new to this, you tend to, everybody does this. Occasionally you use too much slip, or your clay just wasn't wedged enough and it's really, really soft and it should have been wedged to help it dry out a little bit more, or any number of things. But basically, you might try to keep going when you shouldn't, because our deadlines are pretty tight, right? So when it starts to feel like you're having trouble getting it to hold its shape, it's too soft, it won't hold its form, it starts to actually squish out instead of up. And instead of continuing to work on that, when it's that soft and it's not working, I want you to set it aside and work on your other one for a little while. Do a few layers of that. Come back to that one. If it's nice outside, then maybe we can set it outside for a little bit on the loading dock, let it dry out, go out and get it, bring it back in. Not dry, but firm up. That kind of thing. So it really helps to have another one to work on, because otherwise the temptation is to just keep going with this one. And I've had people redo this piece like 3-4 times before they get one to work. And it's because they don't learn from their first mistakes that they needed to stop. They needed to let the clay rest and firm up, or they needed to wedge their clay more. If you wedge on a porous surface, some of the moisture is getting pulled up into that wood or the fabric or the hardy backer board. Man, that stuff sucks water up like mad. So those things will absorb some of that water and it will start to firm up. So if your clay is too soft, you've got to wedge it more. There's no way around it. It's that, or you just let it sit out for like 5 hours and come back to it later, and then you've just blown your entire class. So that doesn't work either. Wedge it. Muscles. Okay, so that's going to sit aside for now, and then I'll add more onto it. I'm not going to add more onto this right now, but I would add more onto it. So for the purposes of our video, that's done. But I would keep coiling and adding on, The way to control the thickness is to make sure that you're rolling the coils the same thickness throughout. So even though I'm starting with it thicker than I need it to be, I'm pinching it as I go. I want to maintain that I'm using that same thickness of coil and then pinching the same amount, same thickness of coil, pinching the same amount, and that's going to control the thickness of that piece. So that's going to give me the control I want. Coils are fun because, let me, real quick before, see, I got ahead of myself. I can change direction with this really easily. So maybe on the next one, I like try to, when I'm pinching it, I bend it in a little bit this way. Or maybe if I'm stacking my coils, I actually stack my coils slightly on my inside. I could run a divider across this. I could build it up all the way from the bottom if I want to give it support, and split my piece in 2 at some point and then bring it back together. I've had people divide it into 3 and bring it back together. there's some really awesome things that you can do with coils, because with every layer, there's an opportunity to change direction. So it's not like I'm taking a flat piece of clay and bending it in a circle, and then I'm getting a cylinder. I'm adding on this way, and I'm adding in or out this way, however I want to. The joys of using a phone as your video is that when you have it in a phone holder, you have to move it every time. So everything's probably shifting a little bit, and everything got moved around. So I just rolled out another coil, and I was about to do something, and then I realized I needed to show you a couple things on this. So one, if I don't want my sides to splay out too much, getting them to go out is easy. Getting them to come back in is always a little more challenging. But one of the things that I always do is I always support this. I'm putting a lot of, just making a solid wall out of my hand, so that when I blend the inside, I'm blending against my hand. I'm actually kind of pushing down on the board, since I'm all the way down, and up here I'll just have to hold it against my body pretty well. You just want to kind of, ever been in physical therapy when you have to just hold it steady? You have to push against when they push on you. It's kind of what you're doing. So you're not trying to push it in, you're just trying to hold it there against yourself. Okay, so this is firmed up a little bit. It's not super firm, but it is firm enough that if I try to go without screwing and slipping, that my clay is not going to stick. So this is soft. My coil is soft, but this edge is just a little bit dryish. Just the outside. The inside's still pretty soft, actually. But I'm going to go over this whole edge. I'm going to score it, and I'm going to add some slip. Now, slip consistency is a personal thing. You are all going to have containers in your kits where you can have your own slip. One of the easiest ways to make slip, when you're in the studio, the easiest way to get slip is out of the recycle bucket. But maybe I'll do that. I can't have you all. Yeah, okay. Usually the easiest way to get it is out of the recycle bucket. The easiest way when you're at home, or when you don't want to stick your hand into a bucket that everybody else has stuck their hand into, is to let the clay dry out, like pinch off a bit of it, probably more than that, obviously, depending on how much I need, but pinch off a bit of it, make it really thin, set it out, let it dry, and then soak it in water, and it will kind of crumble and dissolve in the water. If you've ever had dry caked on mud on your clothes, and then when you first put water on it, like the really, really loose stuff just kind of like falls away. It's the same idea. So all I'm doing is softening up this outside. I don't need to slip this side, because that's just excessive. And then everything's goopy again, and I don't want it goopy. So now that's soft, and now I can add that in. Very little difficulty. And then my coil actually got a little bigger. I'm squishing it more, so, I disobeyed my own make it the same size rule. There we go. That, and then I'll go up again, and then I'm gonna really blend and scrape at this. If it's thicker than this, I'm gonna actually scrape it away. So I'm gonna blend it inside and outside. Sliding away from me. If my paper sticks to this, it's not a huge deal. It'll probably fall off on its own when it's dry. We can pull off what we need to. I do want you to be able to sign your piece, so that might be a little bit of an issue. You can always also use like a wax paper or a plastic plate or something that will slide really easily on whatever you have it on. We do have wear boards, which are just square boards that apparently I don't have in my own studio right now. I mean, I do have boards, but they're not. But we have smaller masonite boards that you can put your piece on. But it still helps to have a little piece of paper to help it release from that. Much better stuck to a piece of paper because we can always burn the paper off, honestly. So what if there's a smoke detector in the room with the kiln? All right, so, and I would keep going still. So, but I wanted to show you that if you've let it firm up a little bit and the edges dried out, then you do want to score it and add a little slip just to soften that edge up. You know, basically, like I said, when we score and slip, we're not just putting slip in between. We're making this edge gooey, and we're making the edge of the other thing gooey, and then we're sticking that together. So normally when we add clay to clay, we want to score and slip. So if I'm adding a knob to something or handles to something or anything like that, I want to score and slip it because I can't squish it together like this without destroying whatever I'm putting on there. But this, I'm basically like kind of pulling this, actually I did that the opposite, pulling that up and this up. I'm almost kind of like wedging each section together. And there is a name for this technique, but like I said, that's like one cultural name. There's multiple cultures that use this technique of not scoring and slipping, but just hand building, just coiling and going. So, got a little ugly again, but that'll get fixed.